To talk to us a little bit more on this issue, we're now joined by Greenpeace climate and energy campaigner Thandile Chinyavanhu. Some of the issues raised by Greenpeace for the upcoming COP26 climate is the lack of consultation. Let's listen. Thandile, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Always good to have you on the programme. You're not happy with the Environment Minister?
Definitely not, Peter. I think that the minister and her department could have done a lot more to ensure that civil society were consulted in the lead up to COP26, though we are still hopeful that at COP26, those delegates that are in attendance from civil society will be given the opportunity to continue to consult with the minister on the issues that are of most priority to us.
Have you not been in conversations with her for a number of years now? I mean, it's not like 5 minutes before COP26 that you need to sit down and put things on the table. I'm sure you must have engaged, and she knows what your issues are.
Definitely, Greenpeace Africa and a number of the other civil society organizations that are campaigning on COP26 have been vocal about what our priorities are leading up to COP26 and have had many opportunities to consult with the minister, one of them being making submissions on the nationally determined contributions, which were recently updated. Greenpeace Africa and a number of other institutions made submissions, and we feel that although some of the comments that have been made have been reflected in the NDC still remains very insufficient for mitigating the 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature goal. And we are hopeful that the minister can still continue to consult with civil society along the way, especially considering that this COP26, due to COVID-19, the prohibitive costs of traveling and accommodation, as well as the mismanaged vaccination drive, will be highly exclusionary, even more than in the past. So it's absolutely a necessity that the minister recognize this and give an ear to the civil society organizations to ensure that these priorities are adequately reflected as they go forward to these negotiations.
Are you concerned that she hasn't taken everything into consideration? Have you any idea what she's going to take to Glasgow?
Well, during the consultation, the minister did give quite a good overview of what the issues would be of discussion at COP26. However, from a civil society perspective, we are aware of the maybe perhaps undue influence of the carbon majors, and it's an absolute necessity that the civil society organization's voice is also reflected. What's clear is that these carbon majors, SASL, ESCOM, and a multitude of other carbon majors across the world, ExxonMobil, Shell, the major carbon majors will be present at this COP, and their voices will be loud and will be listened to by these global leaders. So it's absolutely essential that civil society has a place and a voice at this COP.
It sounds to me like you probably need to be talking to two ministers at the same time, not just the Environment Minister, but also sounds like the Energy Minister as well, because he's talking up coal quite a bit recently.
Definitely, that has been something that civil society has been quite vocal on, that Minister Mandashe's sentiments with regards to coal and our energy mix seem to be quite misaligned to what the rest of the South African government are proposing in terms of the Paris Agreement and the commitments that have been made. Minister Mandashe's goals specifically surrounding her powership and the exploration of coal are completely misaligned to what has been proposed in the nationally determined contributions. And that's something that we continue to probe on, is how do these plans fit into what is being proposed by the NDCs?
All right. So is there enough being done by our government, do you think, and world leaders in reaching the targets set out by summits such as these coming up?
Definitely not. And that's something that we've been quite vocal on with regards to the nationally determined contributions. So earlier this year, the minister did release the updated NDCs and gave civil society the opportunity to make submissions on this. And Greenpeace Africa was one of the civil society organizations that made a commentary on this. And we pointed out that the NDCs as they stand are too weak to be considered and aligned to the Paris Agreement. Greenpeace Africa proposed an emission reduction range of 288 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. And we also implored the minister to explore a greater uptake of renewable energy, as this could serve as one of the greatest emission reduction mitigation measures that have been proposed in the NDC. So we're hopeful that the government, especially the minister, will heed this call and become a champion for renewable energy and its potential to provide South Africa not only with a reliable energy source, but also to provide us with an emission reduction mitigation source.
How is South Africa, maybe even the continent when we think about it, contributing to the climate change challenges? I know for sure that we are probably the biggest sufferers of climate change, but our footprint is by far less, isn't it, than the biggest contributors to the problem?
Definitely, as South Africa and Africa in particular, as emissions dwindle compared to the global north, which is why it's so important that as we approach this COP, that the global north are aware that what we want to see from them is commitment and alignment as well to the 1.5 degrees Celsius target. But South Africa definitely does have a historical responsibility in terms of emissions. We have two carbon majors, Eskom as well as Sasol, that have contributed significantly to our emissions in the past. And it's definitely important that as we approach this COP, that we are cognizant of their role in climate change and that they are held accountable for the source of emissions that they have been responsible for. Sasol is actually identified by the Carbon Disclosure Project as one of 100 top companies that have contributed to 71% of the globe's emissions since the 1980s. And that's a significant number to consider. And so we definitely need to recognize that we do have a historical responsibility, and we're not innocent approaching this COP26, but we do have a role to play in mitigating our emissions. And we definitely want to see our government taking cognizance of this and putting forward ambitious targets that are in alignment with what is required by science, as well as what is considered a part of our fair share range.
So with that in mind then, just how far is South Africa in meeting the Paris Accord targets?
Well, according to the analysis that's been done by Greenpeace Africa, South Africa's current emission targets are still aligned to a 4 degrees Celsius world, and that is well over what is required for us to mitigate climate catastrophe. So ultimately what we will see if we do exceed this 1.5 degrees Celsius target is a lot more extreme weather events such as drought, as we're witnessing in the Karoo and many parts of South Africa, including the Eastern Cape, Northern Cape, and that's affecting many of the farmers on the ground and affecting our food security. But we'll also definitely see increased precipitation, and that will ultimately lead to floods in a number of flash floods, particularly around the eastern side of South Africa, KZN. We're already starting to see a number of cyclones, such as Cyclone Eloise earlier this year, that affected many regions in Mpumalanga, Limpopo, and many of our neighboring countries such as Zimbabwe and Mozambique as well. So approaching this COP26, we also need to be cognizant of the fact that we have a responsibility not only to South Africans, but as well as our neighboring countries to mitigate climate change as one of the most industrialized countries on the continent.
Talking about mitigation and adaptation, because those are two key principles and issues that we have to deal with, and that the developed worlds in particular are the biggest contributors, there does seem to be an obligation and an agreement that they should do more to help developing nations such as South Africa to deal and meet with these challenges of adaptation and mitigation. This is something that the Minister is pushing as well. Your thoughts on her thoughts and her approach?
This is definitely something that civil society is in support of. These global north countries have committed to providing these finances, and it's time that they deliver on that. These finances will be crucial in allowing for South Africa to invest in a just transition and ensure that we are actually mitigating, adequately mitigating our emissions and have the necessary IP and technology to actually deploy these emission reductions. But something that civil society will be campaigning on is ensuring that these finances are in the form of grants and not loans that will increase our debt burden and ultimately affect the average South African far worse than may have been anticipated. But what's definitely important for us going into this is also ensuring that for South Africans that the climate funds that have been dedicated to emission reductions and just transition are particularly earmarked for these specific projects that will ensure decarbonization in South Africa, and that they are not dedicated to further propping up carbon majors. And that's definitely something that is a risk, as we're seeing carbon majors such as Sasol, Shell and BP definitely lobbying for gas as a transition fuel, which would leave it open to being able to access some of these funds that are dedicated for decarbonization, which would only serve to prop them up and continue to allow for them to emit and pollute.
Thandile Chinyavanhu, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very, very much indeed. And I hope the Minister's listening because she might just pick up the phone and ask for your number and I'll put it through to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, that's Greenpeace climate and energy campaigner Thandile Chinyavanhu saying that she had hoped that the Environment Minister would have listened to more of the social activists, climate change activists, social groups to prepare her for her trip to Glasgow. But I do suspect that the Minister's well aware of what the concerns and issues are.